I work for a government agency, always looking for good, enthusiastic men to help us carry out our directives.
You're telling me that there is a movie company in Hollywood right now that is funded by the CIA?
I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it.
I mean, can you ever really trust another human being? No, the answer is you cannot.
Either very smart or incredibly stupid.
Test. Everything's a test, remember? Nothing is what it seems.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the CIA in Hollywood. I am Tom Secker of SpyCulture.com.
And I'm Pierce Redman of PorkinsPolicyToReview.com, and this is Episode 3, The CIA and the Recruit.
Today on the show, we're going to be looking at the 2003 film The Recruit, starring Al Pacino and Colin Farrell, and it tells the story of a young man recruited into the CIA by a veteran agent, and it rapidly turns into this twisting, turning thriller where everything is a test and nothing is what it seems. And perhaps more than any other film that we're examining in this first season, there was a lot of CIA involvement in the production of this film. And joining us to analyse this film is a very good friend and trusted colleague, Aaron Franz, the man behind ageoftransitions.com, the host of Transresistor Radio, and the co-host of Themes and Memes. So Aaron, welcome to the show, and I hope you're doing well.
Thank you very much for having me. It's going to be fun today.
Well, I'd just like to sort of kick things off here by pointing out how Al Pacino, much like Robert De Niro, who we examined in episode 2, he's kind of best known for being a bit scary, or at least for being intense and crazy. And so it's no surprise, really, to see these kinds of actors turning up in CIA-assisted movies, because they carry a little bit of that with them, even when they're doing quite unusual roles that aren't necessarily what you expect of them. And I have to say, I really, really liked The Recruit. I enjoy Al Pacino a lot in this film, and this is probably, well, it is my favourite film of all the ones that we're looking at in this first season. But at the same time, it is a piece of CIA-moulded propaganda. This is something that they were intensely involved in, and it's very much their messages that are ringing through in this film. And there's a bit of a contradiction here that I thought it was a good time to address, really. Because there's this tendency, right, among critics of popular culture to kind of insult and degrade all popular culture in one go, as though there's absolutely nothing good about it. And the reality, to my mind, is that if it was all really, really badly done, then it wouldn't be very effective, it wouldn't be successful. And that's quite often conveniently ignored by the critics. And, you know, it's just much easier to act like, oh, I'm above it all. I've got nothing to do with that. I don't sink to that level. Whereas in reality, I don't think I've ever really found a single person who was completely kind of above and beyond pop culture. But you know what I mean? There is this contradiction here in enjoying something that you know is a piece of propaganda. Or at least a lot of people feel that's a contradiction. But Aaron, I mean, how about you? What do you make of this question of, I know you enjoyed this film, but at the same time, I'm sure you recognise its nefarious and duplicitous qualities as well.
Yeah, I think in realizing the fact that it is good, technically speaking, and just aesthetically, and it's a film that you can sit back, relax, and enjoy. Just making a point to say to yourself, yes, that's true. This is a good film. I enjoy it. It was crafted so that I would enjoy it and so that a mass audience would, and that, you're going to get a couple people who don't like any given film, but that's just how things are. But I think in realizing and admitting that fact, you're taking a step in the right direction because, like you're saying, you understand the point of propaganda because it has to be appealing. It can't be just like some sort of like blaring voice on a megaphone shouting orders to you. Nobody's going to listen to that. And you're going to kick the guy off his ladder and take his megaphone away and get rid of him. That's not what propaganda is at all. It's not how it works. So, I think it's very important to realize that films are actually good and people do like them for a reason because they are crafted art pieces.
Sure. And P.S., I mean, what about you? Do you think that that realization really helps actually understand what these films are doing, rather than, you know what I mean, that attitude of rejecting the notion of enjoying these things.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything wrong with enjoying these films, and I also think The Recruit is probably the best film that we have for the series right now, and it's just a fun movie. But I guess, beyond that too, I mean, you can always look at it like, well, if you don't watch any of this, then you're not going to know what's really going on. You do have to consume a certain amount of propaganda sometimes to understand what particular agendas are. But with this movie too, I mean, like Aaron was saying, I mean, it's just a good movie. It's crafted a certain way, and I think more broadly speaking, it's interesting to see that propaganda can be good art. It can be clever. It can be smart. It can move you a certain way. And what's so fascinating with the CIA's propaganda within Hollywood is that it doesn't, most of the time, it doesn't take the sort of DOD approach to this, where they just sort of pound you over the head and, hoorah, military this and that, and, let's kill them all. Whereas as we'll see with The Recruit, it's much more subtle, it's much more interesting, and again, I mean, kind of you want to just tell people, like, get over it. Yes, it's propaganda, but if you're just going to ignore everything and put up your blinders, then I don't know. I mean, go back to sleep, and you can go do whatever you were doing before. But I see nothing wrong with that. And Tom, we've talked about before. I mean, we both love the TV series Homeland, which is obviously the CIA's premier television show.
Well, and like Homeland, this was something of a pet project for the CIA, right? This wasn't something they just had a little bit of tangential involvement in. This is something where they got down and dirty. They got both thumbs and all their fingers firmly into this pie. But, I mean, unlike some of the films that we've already looked at and some others that we are going to be looking at, the argument that we can make for The Recruit being a CIA-involved film is very, very easy to make. Chase Brandon, the CIA's first entertainment liaison officer, who we spoke about quite a lot last time, he was heavily, heavily involved in this production. It is one of only a handful of films that are mentioned on his IMDb page, which by no means lists all of the films he was involved in, not by a long way. But it's also mentioned on his homepage, chasebrandon.com. And if you manage to find the half-hidden section of his website, the bit that you can only get through search engines, you can't get there from the homepage, you find that he had quite a long-standing relationship both with Roger Town, who was the principal screenwriter behind The Recruit, and with Jeff Apple, who was one of the producers. And he actually has projects in development with both of these men right now, and this is 12, 13 years after The Recruit was released. So clearly these guys worked well together. They worked closely and they worked well together on this film that we're talking about. Of course, the film also features scenes that were shot at Langley. Chase Brandon appears in the very, very spooky making-of documentary that we'll get into at the end of this discussion. But, I mean, aside from all of that, it's perhaps the film itself, actually, that I think that gives us the strongest indications that this was a CIA project. Because, yeah, it's just much more like Homeland. It's very much the CIA's agendas that are really shining through and making up most of, I would say, the core content and storyline of the film. But Pierce, before we get into the film itself, do you have anything to add on the CIA's involvement in The Recruit, or on Al Pacino for that matter?
Sure, yeah. Al Pacino is another, it's interesting sort of parallels with De Niro. Obviously, they've been in movies together, but again, we have the sort of tough gangster Italian-American playing CIA operative. So that's sort of fascinating. And for whatever reason, Leon Panetta had a bit of a thing for Al Pacino. And of course, Leon Panetta was a former head of the CIA as well as the Department of Defense. And was remarked multiple times, including the day after the bin Laden raid, to a group of about 25 congressional freshmen who were having a tour of Langley, that he wanted Al Pacino to play him. This was also revealed in a whole bunch of other emails relating to the DOD's Office of Inspector General, their investigation into what the leaks that were going on with Zero Dark 30, multiple people were, talking about, oh, yes, Panetta wants Pacino to play him. And apparently Panetta was pretty displeased with James Gandolfini, who, again, we have another Italian-American gangster playing a a CIA official. He didn't like that, and he kept remarking about, I wish Pacino this and that. So that's sort of a tangential, but something interesting that, for whatever reason, Panetta wanted Pacino to play him, and is all the more odd when you sort of take a step back and look at, who Pacino played in The Recruit. This is he's quite a terrifying CIA officer. He does some pretty awful things, so it's interesting to look and see that Panetta wanted Al Pacino to play him. But speaking specifically about The Recruit, there is the connection with Disney, and The Recruit was produced in part by Touchstone Pictures, which is known for sort of edgier, darker films that Disney wants to produce, and they produced quite a few. They produce a ton of movies, but some really interesting ones that sort of have some interesting connections going on there. And we have The Rocketeer in 1991, which, Tom, you've spoken about on Clandestine before. Father of the Bride 2, which both of us spoke about. That's interesting only in that it portrays Arabs, again, as horrible. It also produced things like Con Air, Armageddon, Face Off. But perhaps most importantly, Enemy of the State in 1998, which is the movie that we're going to be talking about next week, and also Bad Company in 2002, which is sort of a bizarre sort of buddy comedy type movie that sort of mimics a lot about The Recruit, and that was made also with Chase Brandon's participation in 2002, and was one of the last films to actually film inside the World Trade Center. And also involved Afghani terrorists trying to blow up New York City, and was also produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. And perhaps most importantly, of course, Touchstone Pictures also produced my favorite Tom Cruise movie of all time, Cocktail, which was made in 1988, and featured the director Roger Donaldson, who went on to direct The Recruit. So Touchstone Pictures is a very interesting company that obviously produces quite a bit, but it seems that there is some sort of interesting thing going on with a lot of these DoD movies, these CIA movies. It's fascinating that Touchstone Pictures would take the director from a movie like Cocktail and bring him in to make a movie with very, in-depth participation with the CIA. So that's all interesting. And just as a sort of, quick aside, the CIA actually helped Disney purchase all of the land in Florida on which, Disney World is situated right now. And they even did some really crazy things, like they helped to set up these sort of fake neighborhoods in and around Disney World so that they could influence the local governments there, and essentially this property in Florida pays like no taxes. No one can regulate them, no one can shut them down, and they sort of operate like this, rogue state down in Florida. And this was all with the help of the CIA. So there's a deep connection between Disney and the CIA, and of course this comes out quite a lot in The Recruit. But yeah, those are the sort of the other kind of sort of connections there, but we can move on to the movie now.
Well, I mean, Aaron, I know you're quite interested in Disney, so much so that you actually moved house to be closer to Disney World.
That's right.
But it does occur to me, quite seriously, that one of the main ideas, the core ideas in this film is the notion of the older man and the younger man, the master and the apprentice, right? And this appears, obviously, in lots and lots of movies, but it is something that turns up in a lot of these CIA-assisted movies. I'm thinking of, like, Gene Hackman and Will Smith in Enemy of the State. You have Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller in Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers. You have Robert Redford and Brad Pitt in Spy Game. There are other examples. And I was just wondering, just wanted to ask you, do you think this is one of the reasons why Disney liked this script and, ponied up some of the dough to actually make the film?
It's a distinct possibility. I hadn't even thought of that. That's a good observation there, Tom. I know that if you look through Disney's catalog specifically, you'll see a lot of that old man and young man, master and protege relationship going on all the time. And it seems to be popular in those what is it, the Pixar films, like that one Up with the old man who has a house, and then the little Boy Scout neighbor comes by and they start floating away. That's the only example I can think of off the top of my head, but I know that there's a whole lot of those. And yeah, it's an important thing, that sort of old man and young man relationship. The fact that it's in so many movies, it's not just arbitrary. People will take it for granted. People take the characters and the relationships of characters and pretty much anything for granted, for that matter. But certainly there's a lot going on. And in this movie in particular, we see the sort of neophyte and master within a secret society sort of relationship. And Colin Farrell is the neophyte being initiated into the secret society that is the CIA here. And clearly that's the case in this movie. And I would also argue in most of those other movies, a lot of those other movies, that's the case too. It's being kind of hinted at. If it's not, if it doesn't even seem that way, it's still, it's still saying that oftentimes.
Yeah, sure. It's still an element of that relationship that even if they're not kind of explicitly being initiated into a society or institution, they're kind of being initiated into the world of those things, and those subjects. But, I mean, before we get ahead of ourselves, I guess we should try and summarize the film just for those who either haven't seen it or haven't seen it recently. And so in The Recruit, like Aaron said, Colin Farrell plays this young man named James, who is an orphan, just like James Bond, who is recruited into the CIA by the martini-drinking Al Pacino, who plays on the young man's lack of a father figure and his unresolved curiosity about his father's life and also his father's death in this mysterious plane crash in Peru. And the young man is taught how to become, in his own words, James Bond, before being drawn into this complex world of double-crossing and second-guessing that Al Pacino's character creates. He creates all of this kind of mystery and smoke and mirrors in order to steal some software from Langley, from the CIA, that he's planning to sell on the black market. And in the end, the apprentice subverts the master or becomes the master. He exposes this dastardly scheme, and it all ends up with Pacino being shot dead. And so my kind of flip one-line summary of this film is that it is the CIA's answer to Eyes Wide Shut. It is the tale of a willing fool who is inducted into this secret world. And in being inducted into this secret world, he's taking us, the audience, along with him. And indeed, just to kind of emphasize this film is actually shown to real-life CIA recruits who are in the coach on the way to the training facility that's as it's depicted in the film. So it's actually part of their induction into the CIA. So I think the real purpose of this film is not so much to advertise the CIA in order to boost recruitment. This isn't like the CIA's version of Top Gun. This is something different to that. I mean, Pacino's character keeps saying in the film, they have lots of people applying to the CIA, so I don't think that's really what it's about. I think it's about inviting us, the watching public, into the CIA just a little bit and giving us, a little look behind the doors of this otherwise very secretive institution. And Pierce, I know you broadly agree with this take on this film, but would you like to elaborate just a little bit on quite what you think?
No, I agree with all of that. I mean, I think that this movie is about us, the viewers' initiation into the CIA as much as it is Colin Farrell or Clayton, his character. And again, that idea of they're just sort of parting the curtain just a little bit, just to give us a sort of a taste of the bizarre, terrifying initiation into this, for all intents and purposes, the secret society. And then I'm sure as we're going to get into, it's sprinkled with lots of overt occult references. Magic features prominently in this film, and not just magic like magic tricks, but the idea of magic being, to alter one's consciousness and one's reality. And this happens to Colin Farrell multiple times throughout the movie. And I think that's what's that's what's so fascinating about the Recruit is that it really isn't. This isn't a movie that is about. It's not Top Gun, as you said. This is really a movie sort of showing a very sort of negative or scary, creepy side to the CIA. But again, it's doing everything that they want it to. It's just it's a strange movie, and and I mean I'll throw it to Aaron for any of his sort of ideas, but I've got some other weird ones that we'll talk about later, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this film for sure, and you're absolutely right in that the propaganda aspect of this film is that it is the CIA giving the public at large their story about themselves. So this is the autobiography of the CIA given to the public. And as one might imagine, the CIA is not going to reveal everything. They can't, right? That's all part of the way they operate. They'll tell us that just flat out. Well, we can't tell you everything, but here's this. And so with that in mind, it just makes sense that they're going to portray themselves in the best way possible. They're going to even make excuses for certain things that the CIA does wrong, and they'll tell their side of the story, I guess, as you could say, in that, oh, yeah, you've heard this about us. That's not true. Now, I know that one thing that they mention over and over again is that as an agent in the CIA, you don't get paid anything. So over and over again, they say, okay, we don't get paid a lot of money to do this. They say it about 10 times. So they want the public to get that idea in there for one thing. And then the other thing they say is that our successes aren't publicized, but our failures are.
Yeah. Well, this is actually the same line appears in The Company of Spies, which is like a kind of like a precursor to The Recruit. It was this 1990s made-for-TV movie that's very, very similar, and they use basically the same line. And of course, this is what Chase Brandon is putting into the script. This is his job. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're absolutely right to highlight that.
They want the public to have a good, just overall picture of the CIA, and I think that the main idea is that, look, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it, right? These guys, maybe they do bad things, but it's not because they want to; it's because they have to. That sort of idea we've heard so many times.
Yeah, sure. I do think there is very much an element of that in this film. I mean, Pierce, like you were saying, it's not a straightforward positive portrayal of the CIA. It's kind of someone's got to get their hands dirty, so aren't you glad it's the CIA that are doing it kind of portrayal. But I mean, just fleshing this out a bit, as you mentioned, there is this black magic element. There are references to teaching this class of CIA recruits the black arts, and he says it's not witchcraft but tradecraft. And this, I mean, the whole story right is one of deception and revelation. There is this relentless repetition of, nothing is what it seems. You can't trust anyone. Everything is a test. And these ideas do turn up in a lot of CIA-assisted productions, but in this film, they're off the scale, really. So this kind of occult view of the CIA is very much something that's built into the narrative and the dialogue. It's clearly an image that they're quite happy with. So I guess the question is why.
I think obviously, and we sort of, we touched on this to a degree when we were talking to Guillermo about The Good Shepherd, but obviously the CIA, recruited very heavily from groups like Skull and Bones. They are obviously into the occult. They understand that there is power in the dark arts and these sort of things. And I think, again, they're trying to let us know that, yes, no, this is real. And magic, not like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but in changing one's conception of reality, that is real. And that's essentially what the CIA is all about. I mean, they're using people. There's a big emphasis in this movie that, your work is all about tricking, assets into giving you information to use people. And there's this weird. I jotted down some notes the first time I was watching it, but this idea that Al Pacino is this sort of like dark underlord that lives off consuming secrets, and that's what he mentions that to Colin Farrell towards the beginning of the movie, he says something about I don't have answers. I only have secrets, and that sort of gets Colin Farrell interested in this. And essentially, I mean, it seems like he joins the CIA because he thinks that if he becomes a recruit, if he gets inducted into the CIA, that somehow he will be able to figure out, was his father in the CIA, and he works for some big oil company, and that's really what's driving him, is this, to find out this secret knowledge. And this becomes even more and more layered later, complete with a sacrificial virgin that Clayton has to get rid of, and Al Pacino makes reference to his own sacrificial virgin when he was in Trieste. Back, when he first started this, he had this woman that he he flipped her. She was his asset. He was giving him all this information, but he had to sacrifice her. He had to kill her in order to, save his own skin. And Layla, who is the sort of love interest of Colin Farrell in this movie, she is presented very much as the sort of sacrificial virgin for the willing fool to kill. And then again, of course, that gets turned around at the end of the movie, and it turns out that Al Pacino had been playing everybody. So interesting that they sort of present you with this very occult, secret knowledge, and then they sort of walk it back a little bit at the end, and they're like, no, it was just Al Pacino was a psycho and a nut, and that's it. We don't really do that much, but sort of, kind of.
Sure, this isn't an institutional problem that it's just this one rogue guy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Again, and you're making a whole movie that is just filled with references to magic, the dark arts, initiation rituals,
not being able to trust reality. Your five senses. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say, Aaron, do you have anything to kind of add in to this? Because we're talking about an institution whose existence is public knowledge, but their actual behaviour most of the time is kept secret. So, yeah, I suppose I'm asking you the same question. Why would they engage in promoting this sort of image of themselves?
Yeah. Well, a note on the end of the film there where Pacino is the bad guy. And as you're saying, you pointed this out, that all of the bad things that kind of happened in the movie are pinned on him, this one individual that was a rogue element within an otherwise virtuous institution, right? That's the idea. So that's the trick played at the end of the movie, very deliberately. It's done in such a way that I think that the audience, generally speaking, would almost forget all the stuff that came earlier, in a sense. Yeah, they would forget the implications of like all the dark ritual initiation sort of things that Colin Farrell had to do at the behest of Al Pacino, and they're just going to pin that on the evil Pacino character, like, oh yeah, that we saw that happen, but it was only because he was bad. That's not what actually happens in the CIA. However, the CIA is telling you that yes, that is what we do, and so very interesting trick. And throughout the film, the CIA is trying to portray itself as a virtuous institution, one that only initiates likewise virtuous people. So you have to be a person of virtue to be within this secret society. That is a very common theme throughout all secret society initiation. It's about your personal virtue and being able to conquer the demons within you. A lot of the initiations and rituals are about doing that and about self-control, self-mastery, that sort of thing. So that element is definitely in the film. And overall, the CIA is saying, hey, look, we're made up of people who are alchemists, who are masters of their own spirits and things like that. I definitely caught that.
Well, and you have the whole thing with... like we keep saying, the James character is kind of lured in because he has this mystery about how his father died and whether his father was a CIA agent, and he thinks that Al Pacino is at some point going to tell him. And Pacino tells him at one point, quite early on, he goes up to him and tries to ask him about this, and he says, this isn't sort of why you're here. You need to kind of shut this off from yourself. You need to overcome this. And that is part of his initiation, right? Is to say, oh, that reason that we sort of told you was your reason for coming in here, that doesn't matter anymore. You need to leave that behind because you're now someone else. You're now an initiate into our secret world. And all of that very much the whole thing is like a massive long initiation, not just for the James Clayton character, but like I say, also for us. And I mean, along similar lines, this Walter Burke character, the one played by Al Pacino, who I do enjoy him in this film. I particularly like the bit where they're in the bar at the beginning of the film, and he's recruiting James Clayton. And Colin Farrell's character asks him, do I have to kill anyone? And he leads in and says, would you like to?
Yeah.
Pacino's a really good actor for a line like that. They picked well. But this character's clearly based on Chase Brandon. He is based on the guy from the CIA who was helping to make this film. Because, I mean, he's a veteran of CIA black operations, in the field operations. He was stationed in Latin America. He ends up training new recruits. All of this stuff in the Walter Burke character matches Chase Brandon's professional biography with the CIA. So this is not just, you, Aaron, referred to it as a kind of autobiography for the CIA. It's a little bit of an autobiography for Chase Brandon himself, I think. All the little James Bond memes that appear in this movie, I reckon, are a result of Brandon's influence, because he was obsessed with James Bond. Like his email when he was the entertainment liaison officer was something like 00chase@cia.gov. I'm not making this up.
Oh, boy.
A lot of characters in productions he's worked on have the same initials as James Bond. If you think Jack Bauer, Jason Bourne, Jack Burns from Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers, the Robert De Niro CIA character, they all have the same initials, and this isn't a coincidence. But as we're saying, this Burke character, he's corrupt, right? He's trying to steal this software from the CIA, and he's going to sell it for millions of dollars. And to touch on something that you brought up, Aaron, I mean, this guy's not a model CIA officer by a long way, but how does this work in the CIA's favour? And if you read Tricia Jenkins' book, The CIA in Hollywood, which is, of course, a major part of the inspiration for this series, she offers this possibility that this is some kind of attempt by the CIA to get higher salaries for their staff, to get a bit more money. And I very much accept that's one of the reasons for this storyline, and as you said, Aaron, for this repeated thing about them going on about how little money they make. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I wonder why else they would be happy with this sort of storyline about a corrupt CIA agent, because it does present an image of the CIA as a whole, which is, at least superficially, it is a more negative image. But I mean, Pierce, what's your thinking on this Walter Burke character?
Oh, I think he's amazing. He's sort of he's got the right amount of creepiness. Al Pacino never looked so pale in a movie before. He looks like he's sort of like a vampire. I actually started to sort of think that in a way the sort of negative portrayal that Al Pacino is corrupt in many ways you would think, who would want to join the CIA after that? But sort of, Sibel Edmonds has talked about and written about in her book, The Lone Gladio, that this is, in fact, the CIA loves people that are corrupt. They love people that are evil. They love people that are willing to abuse others, to cheat, to steal, to murder, to torture. And I couldn't help but think, watching The Recruit now, after having read The Lone Gladio and other things, that they were sort of hoping that they might get a few more recruits of that sort of caliber, and that to say that even so, yes, we're this big moral upstanding, we're all patriotic, and Al Pacino makes a big deal about that in the beginning. We're good, they're bad. There's lots of enemies. We don't even know who they are anymore, and you're here because you're all you're good patriotic Americans. And then, cuts into, okay, now let me show you how to, chop someone's head off. Let me show you how to steal from people, how to use people. So I think on some level, they're kind of, it is a recruitment film in a sense for the more nefarious elements that might watch this movie and be like, ooh, maybe I could make a job here. And of course, I mean, maybe we're meant to believe that Al Pacino was good and then became corrupted. But you kind of look at him and you sort of think you were always sort of like this, and you did quite well for yourself. So, that was sort of what I was thinking of viewing it now. I don't know. I mean, I think they're okay with having nasty people in CIA productions, so long as they're taken care of, and they get their comeuppance, and then it's okay. And then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, phew. So now we've completely rid ourselves of all the negative elements. Now Colin Farrell, you and your girlfriend, who's a CIA agent, you guys can go, jet setting around the world. And that's an interesting thing in this movie. There is no enemy, really, per se.
No, you're
which is a fascinating idea, because they sort of allude to that in the beginning of the movie. There's a scene where Pacino is sort of talking about how, we have enemies everywhere, but they're sort of these invisible enemies. We can't really tell. And this is another thing too. There's no reference really. There's like one reference to Islamic extremism, and it's a very sort of throwaway line. And then aside from that, I mean, there's one mention of the Russians, and Pacino doesn't even call them the KGB. He calls them the Russian organization. Now, and again, there is no real, the immediate enemy in the end, you find out, is sort of Al Pacino, who's out to steal this software program. But that was a fascinating thing to me, that they're talking about how there's enemies everywhere, but the only enemies in these are the ones that Pacino creates. And that's where, they're spending all this time and money. And again, Layla, Bridget Moynihan, this character she plays, Layla, again, she is running a separate operation that's designed to see if you could steal information out, if you could take it out of Langley. So again, sort of creating enemies, who is doing this? Is there someone? So just a fascinating kind of an idea. And it sort of leaves you at the end where, who are we meant to, be fighting against? And I think that's a bigger element to this movie, is that the truth means nothing. And they make that very clear in the beginning. Trust no one. Everyone is out to get you. Everything is a test. And sort of at the end of it, you're still sort of left guessing what is going on. Who really was Al Pacino? He talks about how I couldn't take this anymore. I couldn't fake it. So what were you faking?
Yeah, it's all internal. It's like the internal dialogue within somebody's own mind. There's conflict there. Everybody's going back and forth about what they really believe. And they made some mention of a line where you can only trust yourself, so they kind of make reference to that. And yeah, there are no real exterior enemies. The enemy is within. So they're kind of telling you that. I think that's true in reality. It's true for an individual. You have to deal with yourself. And especially if you can only trust yourself, you got to deal in that way. But I think this is the way the CIA operates. That's what they seem to be telling us. And we have to remember that there is the internal reality of whatever the CIA is, and then there's the external version of the story, which this movie is attempting to present to the public. And perhaps this movie gives us a little bit of both, but in presenting that public narrative for mass consumption, they realize that they can't take liberties, and if they twist the end in the way that they did, where Pacino is the bad guy and he's taken care of, that overall, the public will be okay. They'll remember that the CIA doesn't pay enough, and that these guys are patriotic Americans trying to do their best. And another bit about the internal reality of what's going on in the CIA. You've got different levels going on there, because Pacino is obviously deeply involved. Chase Brandon, deeply involved in the CIA. And then there's the data entry guys that Colin Farrell starts working with to go undercover within the CIA. So he's going undercover within the CIA, right? Again, that internal dialogue going on within the mind of the CIA itself. But anyway, the underlings are all saying like, oh yeah, we go out to the bar and we show our CIA badge and it gets us laid. And that's the exact opposite of what Pacino said earlier. He said, "Oh, it won't get you laid. It won't get you money." So we're always given these polar opposites, and it's bouncing back and forth, just like the voice in most people's minds, bouncing back and forth, never knowing which end is right. And the whole time, it's I think it's using that purposely and directing things to an ultimate conclusion that sort of the belief is that the public narrative does work, I think, in the end.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. Throughout most of the movie, you're getting this very ambiguous portrayal of the CIA, but in the end, the rogue officer is found, he is exposed, he is taken out, he is no longer a problem. And it's not exactly triumphal, the ending, but it's supposed to be quite positive. We're supposed to kind of believe in the CIA at the end and think this is all right. But, I mean, one scene in particular where this very troubling, ambiguous, sort of double-think portrait of the CIA, the sequence, though, where it's brought out most effectively is where Colin Farrell's character is kidnapped and held in this windowless prison for an uncertain period of time. It's implied it's quite a long time that he's in there. He's tortured. And then when he finally gives in and gives up the name of his instructor, one entire wall of this cell hinges open. It opens up and it reveals that he's been sat there being watched by the rest of this class of CIA recruits. They're all sat there watching him on CCTV. And, of course, once again, that everything was just a test. And this, I mean, Pierce, I know this scene struck you as being at the core of what this film is all about. And it really, it's a very powerful scene. I think it's probably the most powerful scene in the whole film. So please explain your thinking on what's going on here.
Well, again, we're stuck again in one of these CIA movies, like with The Good Shepherd, that features a pretty graphic torture scene. And again, it sort of takes place in the middle of the movie, just as it did with The Good Shepherd. But yeah, I mean, this is one of these fascinating things because it shows the sort of lengths that they would be willing to go. And of course, I think we'll talk about later, this was one of the elements that they claim, we took creative license with the torture scene. That never happens, blah, 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 blah. Of course, the CIA, I'm sure that not only are they torturing people, and again, this movie came out in 2003, which just around the same time that the revelations in Abu Ghraib were taking place. But no doubt the CIA tortures their own people in order to train them. How would you withstand this sort of torture? But an interesting thing is that they are filming it, and that they have students watching. And this sort of opens up the idea, were they filming Abu Ghraib? Were the pictures in Abu Ghraib designed to teach people? Were they just, for something else? I have no idea. I mean, and again, Al Pacino seems to have no qualms with any of this. He's all very, this is just what we do. Everything is a test. He shouldn't have gotten caught. That's his big thing is just don't get caught. And yeah, it's upsetting. It's and again, they play on Colin Farrell's emotional compassion for this woman, Layla. And that is his weakness continually throughout the entire movie. He's supposed to pick up a woman in a bar in one scene, and that's part of, it's one of his tests. And Layla is there, and she said, she's drunk, and I got fired, or I got kicked out, blah, blah, blah. And, she sort of insinuates, come home with me, I want to sleep with you. And Colin Farrell comes out and, sort of, let me just get you a cab. And, boom, suddenly, the lights turn on and they're, you failed the test. Like, Layla's mission was to make sure you didn't complete your mission. And again, in this, the thing that makes him break, so to speak, is when his interrogator throws a pair of jeans in his face covered in urine that are supposed to be from Layla's, and this is what makes him snap. So interesting that that any sort of compassion is a weakness, you've got to sort of suck the humanity out of you, and that seemed to be the purpose of a lot of these exercises, particularly the torture one. And again, that sort of plays up the macho alpha male James Bond sort of image. In James Bond movie, I mean, he's always slapping women and killing them, and basically uses his penis to get whatever he wants. And again, this is portrayed somewhat in The Recruit as well. But I don't know. The torture scene is it's bizarre in the timing that in a movie coming out around this time that they would include something like that. That it turns out that they're just studying him is just seems like the sort of wink and a nod that you see in CIA propaganda all the time, that they might be sort of telling you, yes, we do in fact kind of do this, and we do film it as well so that we can show other recruits, how to withstand torture. So that scene again just sort of, and it's one of the few moments of violence in the entire movie. Again, most of the movie is fairly sterile. It's either at the farm, which is the training facility, or it's in an office in Langley. There's very little violence going on. And the only violence that really takes place is all being orchestrated by Al Pacino. So, Al Pacino instructs that the torture take place. Al Pacino basically makes Colin Farrell kill another CIA guy by convincing him that he's really a double agent, again, for this mysterious enemy. We have no idea who they are. Fascinating. And again, I can't help but think that all of these things are really deliberate. They didn't just put it in to spice up the movie. They really put it in there to show you that this is happening and maybe this is why. And again, at the end of the day, it's sort of like, well, it's fine. It was just a test, right? It's over. Just forget about it. That's sort of how Al Pacino expects Colin Farrell to react to that. So again, sort of normalizing torture. It's okay. He lived, didn't you? Or he keeps praising him. Well, you did better than anyone else in the past 15 years. You lasted longer.
As though you were tortured for longer, as though that's something to be proud of and something to be thinking this is a good thing in my life, that I was tortured for longer than anyone else was. But, I mean, Aaron, what are your thoughts on this part of the film? Because it is quite powerful, isn't it?
I think everything that you're saying about this is pointing to the main sort of thrust of the film, which revolves around psychodrama. Mm-hmm. You're saying there's no actual violence, no actual enemies. It's all in the mind, right? So this is all just one big psychodrama, the movie. But beyond that, what the CIA does is all one big psychodrama, and all the, all the missions that they're supposedly doing that were being told by CNN and all the news networks, like, oh, if it weren't for the CIA, we'd be in danger. Well, that's just psychodrama. It's just to terrify the public into believing that the CIA is necessary. And in the beginning of the film, where Pacino is recruiting Colin Farrell, he tells you as much. He goes, nothing is what it seems, is how he says. And he's ripping up a newspaper, and he says, nothing is what it seems. So he's telling you, look, what you hear in the news is absolute garbage. I ought to know. I'm in the CIA, right? Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, he rips up the paper, but then through a magic trick, he puts the paper back together. So in that part of the whole symbolism going on, he says, look, the papers tell you a bunch of crap. It's nonsense. Don't listen to it. But the CIA has a capability to put everything back together. And what he's saying is that the CIA basically pieces the news together for public consumption, and people believe it. And on the torture scene, too, I think it deserves to be noted that we've seen similar scenes in other movies. I know that V for Vendetta has a very similar sequence where Natalie Portman is locked in a cage, her head dunked in water for days on end, head shaved. And that's portraying the same sort of dark, twisted initiation ritual of secret societies. Some do that sort of torturous kind of stuff in their initiation rituals. So I think that's what's going on in that particular scene.
Well, and just to pick up on that, because it kind of connects to a film that we'll be talking about in a couple of episodes' time, The Social Network. It also reminds me a bit of the kind of hazing rituals that go on in these finals clubs at college campuses and all of that. There's a lot of, I mean, this theme and this sort of scene does seem to turn up a lot in these kinds of movies. But we're getting on in time here, and I do want to at least get in a bit of discussion about the making of documentary about this film, which is perhaps as interesting as the film itself, really, in my opinion. It's called Spy School. It's about 15 minutes long, and it is quite possibly the most interesting DVD bonus feature I've ever seen. It features Chase Brandon quite prominently, but it only identifies him as a CIA officer. It doesn't mention that he was the entertainment liaison officer, their man in Hollywood. And Chase, of course, it turns out, possibly not surprisingly, is an absolute master of doublespeak. Almost everything he says in this documentary contradicts something else that he says in this documentary. Mm-hmm. And just to give you a flavour of the man and what he's all about, I just want to quote here from his personal website about his own career in the CIA. And it says, "For 25 years he served in the agency's elite clandestine service as an undercover covert operations officer, carrying out foreign assignments involving international terrorism, counterinsurgency, global narcotics trafficking, and weapons smuggling." And the way that that's written, it sounds like he spent 25 years smuggling drugs and weapons and carrying out terrorism for the CIA, which of course may well be true, but it's an odd thing to put on your personal website. And of course he could say, it doesn't mean that. It just means he was working on assignments in those sorts of areas, not that he was involved in actually doing those things. But this is the sort of doublethink and doublespeak that we find so often when we look at anything to do with the intelligence services. We find this kind of weird, where they write things like that you really could interpret in two vastly different ways. But let's look at this documentary specifically, because, Piers, I know you wanted to pick out some of the more astounding things that are said and shown in this. So please, have at it.
Well, I actually forgot. I was watching it the other day, and I forgot that they censor the job recruiters at a job fair. Mm-hmm. And they even censor an image of somebody, like an ad in a magazine, which is like, why are you even showing it then? And it's if you have a CIA ad in whatever, Sports Illustrated, why are you censoring it when you're showing it on camera, which is just bizarre. And again, one of the sort of layers, got to protect them. And it's like, well, but you put them in a magazine. So that's really interesting. Again, then it shows the, quote, actual CIA training footage, which is interesting that they, I have no idea what that footage really is. But again, amazing that they would get access to that. And they Chase Brandon goes into, how, the farm exists, but it doesn't really exist. Or, it's a lot of that sort of, we can neither confirm nor deny that this elite train. And then, he sort of says that we can't confirm or deny it, but then he says that, we've got a bunch of these too. It's not just the farm. We've got a few other ones out there. And then I thought one of the other really interesting things is Chase Brandon in this will go on and on about how accurate this movie is, that this is really what it's like to join. But then says, there's some poetic license like with the torture. That doesn't really happen. So is this ritualistic nature? Is that accurate? Is there a sort of, willing fool and a sacrificial virgin to everyone that joins? And again, the torture is not real. I mean, we torture Arabs, sure, in Iraq and, anybody in Afghanistan, but we don't do it, a little bit to one or, the other. So, again, the amount of doublespeak and doublethink that gets spouted out in this little feature is just insane. And just constantly presents things as truthful and then sort of destroys them. So, Chase Brandon talking about how accurate the recruit is, and then talks about, really emphasizes the close bonds and friendship that you make in the CIA. Well, from the movie The Recruit, they're just don't trust anyone. Don't trust your friends. Don't trust yourself. Don't trust. It's
well, and at the end of the film, everyone's relationships are in tatters. They're completely destroyed. Yeah.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, Colin Farrell has killed one of his friends. He's gotten his mentor killed, and I don't know. Almost killed his lover. So right. Of course, the great bonds, patriotic friendship in the CIA. But maybe the most interesting thing, and Aaron, I'd love to get your take on this, is the deleted scenes that we see in this movie.
Yeah.
because they're just bizarre that they would even include them. And in the deleted scenes, they're like at an embassy party, and Al Pacino is referred to as His Excellency, refers to himself in the third person, and he's some sort of, I don't know, military dictator. He doesn't touch people, and within that, I think that's what's so insane about this little feature is that it seems like, if you thought the CIA was involved in making the film The Recruit, they definitely were 100% involved in making this little featurette for the movie. And I'll just one quick line, and then I'll throw it back to you guys. But there's this part where our buddy Chase is doing his damnedest to sort of talk about how amazing and great the CIA is, and he has this fairly long quote, but he says, "You have to stay totally on this side of the legal Dudley Do-Right line. And then at the same time, you have to be able to step across and lie and steal for the U.S. government. You're lying about who you are. You're procuring, acquiring, stealing secrets. That's the conundrum of the personality type. That's why we look for certain types of people who can handle that dichotomy." Immediately after that line, it cuts to a scene of Al Pacino as His Excellency, the dictator, saying, "The true sociopath cannot distinguish between his lies and the truth. His lie is the truth. That's good. Learn from that. Use that." So, just the most insane sort of crazy, what are they trying to tell us in this little featurette? I don't know.
Yeah, well, they're saying, it blew me away too, that line from Pacino, and that they put it in here as something they wanted to get across, because as you're saying, CB, Chase Brandon there, is saying we're looking for a particular sort of person that can do this. And what is this that we're talking about? Well, basically have a psychopathic personality that only looks out for the self. And again, that's reiterated throughout the film. You can only trust yourself. In the end, the characters only have themselves. Right? And it goes along with this theme that I'm talking about, the internal dialogue within the mind. In the end, it's only you in there, but you have to, you're the only one that you have. And Pacino, again, earlier in the film, makes mention to the little voice inside your head that most people never listen to. So they're definitely going for that. They're overtly saying that they're looking for people who are able to at least act like sociopaths, if not actually be one. That's the sort of personality they're going for. And another little note I'll throw in here, Chase Brandon makes mention to the part of the movie where they're doing the personality profile sort of early on to see, what sort of personality the recruits have, and how in-depth and bizarre the questions are, and really off the wall and very personal too. I know that today, if anyone, not just in the CIA, but any given job, you're hard-pressed to find one that doesn't do one of these personality profiles on you. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a prerequisite to employment these days. But it wasn't always like that. It's only in recent years it's gone to be like that. I just wonder, and I'm speculating here, I wonder if the CIA has been doing these sorts of personality profile tests to employ their recruits for a long time, and that they're actually sort of the masters of that game, so to speak, and it kind of trickled down from them, and they kind of gave their methods and techniques to other employers, I just, that again, that's speculation, but I just wonder, like, throughout the years, if that has leaked into the mass hiring sphere, whatever we might call that, to be just a norm in society, if that's where it came from.
Yeah, sure. No, like I say, very, very good, interesting question. My take on that little deleted scene, which is, this is something that is not just in the documentary, it is also included as one of the deleted scenes on the DVD. So it does suggest that they kind of wanted to put this in the film, but possibly decided this is a little too close to the bone, so let's relegate it to the DVD extras. And just to go against most of what we've been saying about this, we're saying this isn't really a CIA recruitment film, but I do wonder if this little bit might have been a little advert saying, are you an unemployed sociopath? Call now. That kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like the one little bit in it that makes you think, right. So in as much as they're trying to recruit anyone, they're trying to recruit either sociopaths or people who can fake it well. And that's actually the one sort of person out there that they're hoping is watching the film. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things I wanted to highlight in this little documentary. The documentary itself was partly filmed at Langley. We actually see Chase Brandon doing the usual thing of, walking over the seal at the entrance and going through the swipe card gates and all of that, which is exactly what we see Colin Farrell do in the movie, and it's shot in the same place. It's shot at the real CIA headquarters. So this only shows how intimately involved the CIA were in this documentary. If they even had that, they even had permission to shoot at Langley for the making of documentary and not just for the film. And there is even this sequence where Chase Brandon's talking about what it is that they teach to real-life CIA trainees, right? And they go through this sort of, you'll get taught demolition and assassination and blah, blah. And this sequence in the documentary mirrors almost exactly the montage in the film where Al Pacino is doing the same thing and explaining to them, we're going to teach you wet and dry demolition and blah, 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 blah. And it's sort of this bizarre admission that, yeah, Al Pacino is essentially Chase Brandon in this film. That's what you're getting. But the one line that really, really stuck out for me that we haven't highlighted yet is from Jeff Apple, one of the producers of this film. And as I mentioned before, he's now Chase Brandon's producing partner. He's a guy working with Chase Brandon. And he says at one point of Undercover Spies, he says, they are the ultimate actors. And now, Aaron, we've discussed before this theatrical element to the security state, and the intelligence services in particular are very theatrical. And even the language, the director of the CIA, everyone in Hollywood has to have an agent. And now you've got this Hollywood producer who works closely with the CIA's man in Hollywood saying that undercover officers are the ultimate actors. What do you make of this?
Yeah, quite a bit, actually. I mean, throughout the film, they're talking about role-playing and how that's one of the main things that they do as CIA officials is role-play and pretend, right? You're pretending to be somebody. And again, it fits into the whole psychodrama. It's all just, it's all scripted. It's all written out. It's not real, but it is real because they try their best to impress upon the audience that this is so. And there's so many levels and layers to this in that this is the way it works in real life, that they do see themselves as actors, as role players. They are doing that. But we're actually watching a movie where that is literally the case. And again, I struggle to know where to begin in talking about this. There's just so much going on that I don't know, the kind of games this plays on the audience, the real life audience, because there's an audience watching this drama, sitting in the movie theater, what it does to their head, it's hard to even try to explain what that is. But certainly the acting, the role playing, and Al Pacino as that crazy admiral or whatever, that was his big deal. He was role playing there. So the whole world stage concept is very real. It has to do with this psychodrama thing, and that all the stuff you read in the newspapers, it's just psychodrama. But we tell you as much. We tell you that within an actual drama, so you don't think it's real, but it is. So what is it? Is the play? What is the play and what is real? The blurring of fact and fiction is so intermingled that the average person struggles to know where to begin talking about this.
Yeah, sure. It very much has that effect on people, I think. And yeah, I mean, it just strikes me as, you were talking about possibly writing a book on this subject. You should definitely include that quote in there from Jeff Apple, because he's not wrong. I mean, I think when I was watching this documentary again today, it struck me, this is basically an extension of the film itself. It's just like an extra little glimpse inside the CIA, just a little bit more than you get in the film. So that, if you bother to look, if you bother to actually get the DVD and watch the bonus features and all of that, you get ever so slightly more initiated into this CIA way of thinking. This CIA way of thinking which thinks that sociopaths, they're useful. But I mean, that's my take. But before we wrap this thing up, I want to give you both the chance to just reiterate anything or add anything else about this film or the documentary. So, Aaron, I mean, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank both of you for having me on the show. It was fun, as I mentioned it would be at the beginning. It turned out to be true. Just one little weird sort of note that I'll throw in here. Pierce was mentioning how this was produced by Touchstone, and it was also another production house, Spyglass Entertainment. So, I mean, I know I've seen that a lot, but it's kind of literally true, and that this is about spies, Spyglass. I don't know. That's not much of anything. But, yeah, I think that when viewing this film, if you want to take away what the propaganda is and what the real purpose of the film is, what you need is the understanding that there is the public narrative that is crafted with purpose by the interested party, here being CIA. They have a PR role to fulfill in this film, in that they have to show a good face to the public. And that's what the movie is about. That being said, we can also understand that a lot of truth, a lot of things that are thrown in the movie that you would be surprised that actually are real are thrown in there. And I think that they get away with that due to the fact that this is a drama and seen as pure drama in the pure sense. Like, oh, yeah, this is a movie, it's drama. But the real world stage role-playing of the CIA operatives in real life remains unseen, misunderstood, not even known as there. If you can begin to start understanding that is the case, that they're playing a role, it's all an act, it's scripted, and yet it is real at the same time. So being able to sort of go back and forth and understand how you can sort of have things both ways, how things are scripted, but they are also quite real. All the bad things the CIA does is real. And I think the average person has difficulty understand or being able to take things both ways. But the film itself is actually crafted as such. It tells you one thing that tells you the other, and you're left with, well, that didn't make any sense. But it does. Did that make sense?
No, absolutely, Aaron, absolutely. Pierce, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, it's a difficult act to follow, but I think I just everything that Aaron was just saying about the world stage, about acting, about what is reality, and that's what's so great about The Recruit, is that they really jam all this stuff in there. And to sort of go back to how we started this whole conversation, is it okay to enjoy propaganda? I think this really where we've come right now with this conversation is why it is important to view these things and to understand them, because you can watch The Recruit and be very confused, as I was the first time I saw the movie. And I was like, wait, what's this program that Al Pacino is looking for? And wait, so Layla was never really a double agent, all those sort of things. But if you start to dissect that, the CIA is actually being quite revealing about how they operate, about what they do. And again, I think that's a theme that we are seeing more and more as this series progresses with these films, is that, again, unlike the Department of Defense or the FBI or some of the other groups that do participate with Hollywood, the CIA is really letting you in on quite a lot of information here. They really are telling you, yes, of course, we employ sociopaths, we employ psychopaths, we use, we alter everything. All reality is altered when you step in, through the looking glass, as Al Pacino says to the recruits when they first enter there. So I think, this movie is just fascinating for that little tiny glimpse into this world. And, if you can get past the fact that, yeah, it's a big pop culture Hollywood movie, there's actually some really, fascinating, amazing things going on. And, I can only imagine what the real how crazy the real initiations are. And just as one final thing. There is this whole notion that Layla is the sacrificial virgin that Clayton has to kill. And that through killing her, he will be, initiated into the secret society, and from there he will be able to figure out the secret knowledge and solve the mystery of his father. And this sort of got me to thinking. This seems like such a they focus on that a lot, and the Al Pacino character has the similar experience. And I was sort of wondering, is this something that happens? Do the CIA, the FSB, do they allow these sort of rituals to take place and even provide each other with victims? And that might seem kind of out there and crazy, but I can only imagine that these things were put in deliberately, and if they're only showing us just a minor glimpse, God only knows what they really do. But and I just wanted to say, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on this episode, and it was great, and I think this is a perfect episode for you.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me here. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, I think you're probably right, Pierce. You've got to wonder if street gangs can arrange for this kind of initiation ceremony where you've got to kill someone in order to ascend up the ranks. If something as kind of commonplace and low-level as that do it and see a purpose in doing it, it's not much of a stretch to think that the FSB and the CIA are up to it as well. So, yeah. But anyway, let's wrap things up there, and I'll just tell you about the next episode, because we're going to be talking to Adam, who is Aaron's co-host on Themes and Memes, and we're going to be talking about another Chase Brandon movie, the 1998 action thriller Enemy of the State. And we'll be looking at things like how this film completely foreshadowed the entire Edward Snowden story, the truly shocking display of surveillance technology in the film, and much, much more besides that. So don't touch that dial and stay with us. But yeah, I'd just like to echo what Pierce just said. Thank you, Aaron, for your thoughts and comments today and for being part of this series.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
And thank you, Pierce, for co-producing this series with me.
Of course.
And to all of you listening, I'd just like to say thank you for listening, and please do join us again soon for another episode of the CIA and Hollywood.